Vegapunk has a lot of explaining to do. I mean, yes, we'd love to hear more about his research on the Void Century, on devil fruits, and on other such mysteries of the world. Like, where and how did Roger find Buggy? Do you think he knows that? But is there something big he's not telling us? And where do his allegiances actually lie? Hello, humans of the world. I'm Dawn of the World. Welcome aboard. While this is a chapter breakdown, I am going to get a little bit speculative, hence the title and thumbnail. I'll add video chapters for navigation if you'd prefer that. Anyway, this is also a bit long and I don't have a lot of time to record and edit, so let's go. Following on from last chapter, Shaka affirms that his assertion about Egghead Island being an island of the past is basically just a theory he's built due to stacks of evidence, because the world government won't disclose this sort of thing, and not even to as high-ranking an asset as Vegapunk. However, he, like the astute theorists of this fandom, has connected the pieces and, as confirmed by Robin, has come to the right conclusion. So the Void Century is the history of a conflict between 20 nations and one technologically advanced kingdom. Does this imply that the other 20 kingdoms were not advanced? Was it just one advanced place? And they attempted to remove all traces of this kingdom from history so that its ideas wouldn't live on. Are they scared of technology? Were they like, technology is bad, fire is scary, and Thomas Edison was a witch? We attack that which we don't understand. Yeah, there's gotta be more to it than that. That being said, a mysterious missing ancient kingdom that is said to be technologically advanced is definitely giving me some Atlantis vibes out here. But I don't think the kingdom disappeared into the sea. That feels too Fishman Islandy. The sky feels too Skypure-y, unless it disappeared into outer space. Maybe that's where the ancient kingdom originally came from. Perhaps they were alien visitors and the 20 kingdoms were like, yeah, no, we don't do that here. There are honestly so many possibilities. These are just the ones that are entering my feeble brain right now at this second. Anyway, it's fascinating to see some of the main characters of One Piece actually talking about the Void Century. And for so much of the story, it's like, well, the Strawhats are over here and the Void Century is over here, and maybe Robin dabbles in it a bit, but we've never really seen anyone else in the crew contemplate it. So to see their shocked reactions, it's a bit of a treat. Have I mentioned today that I love Usopp? He will not stop being the funniest man. Of course he was gonna react like this. I love him so incredibly much. I mean, I know I say that Brooke's my favorite, but sometimes I think that maybe Usopp's my favorite too. Anyway, keeping in mind Vegapunk telling them anyone who knows anything about this ancient kingdom immediately has a death warrant from the world government, which we already knew, and him disclosing that even though he's affiliated with the world government, if he were to raise the topic of the ancient kingdom with them, they'll erase him, has led me to believe that this is currently on track to happen. Through some means, I think that the world government have been alerted to Vegapunk's research and theories concerning the Void Century, as well as his trip to Elbaf, where he studied the texts of Ohara, and that's why currently the CP0 are being sent to the island in order to depose of him while also being told to keep his research. That part's still an asset to the world government at all, and they're not going to want anyone else to stumble across the more voidy century portions of it. And I think based on Shaka disclosing to Dragon in chapter 1064 that he'll be soon dead, he might know that they're onto him. The world government won't shy away from even doing their own in if they say the wrong thing. Lucci, Stussy, and Kaku even heavily allude to this in recent chapter. But I also think there could be a second reason that Shaka is anticipating his/Vegapunk/their imminent demise. Is creating multiple additional bodies for yourself healthy? And is it possible to overdose on information even with these additional bodies? We see in Vegapunk's flashback that he was the literal embodiment of big brain, and based on Dragon's comment, this brain just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Talk about impractical. It probably also wasn't that physically great, which is why, combined with his perpetual busyness and having too many ideas for just one person to conduct, he's undergone some kind of procedure to divvy his ever-expanding mind and busyness up into 6 additional people. There's a lot of emphasis on the panel where Shaka says that the Oharan books he read are stored in his head, and while this is to drive home the fact that he's continued Ohara's research, it is also giving us a glimpse into the vast amount of information Vegapunk is storing in his mind. The human mind operates kind of like a computer in some ways, and what happens when you continuously overload a computer? Eventually, she crashes. Unless you find more space. Which leads me to the point that I don't think Vegapunk has created just 6 satellites for himself. While those 6 are the main alpha satellites, I'd like to draw everybody's attention back to 1063 when we get a group of people, where we get a group of strange people walking past. Chopper asks who they are, and we haven't gotten an answer yet. And there's also countless others shown to be walking around in this lab/mall facility. We're distracted by the arrival of Bartholomew Kuma, Mall Cop, and forget about them. What if these are also Vegapunk satellites? An entire country of just him. And what if that still isn't enough? Atlas did say endless ideas, not enough resources after all. By resources, did they mean bodies in which to continue storing the unfathomable amounts of information Vegapunk is drowning in? Is there physically not enough mental capacity to accommodate Vegapunk's endlessly expanding mind? We see at the end of this chapter with the Luffy party that Vegapunk Stella's head now seems to be quite empty, where his satellites are busy generating ideas, winning over Straw Hats, being evil, and snack dump and napping. The Stella body himself is, well, he doesn't seem to be particularly busy to me. It's possible that dividing himself up has some kind of effect on his mind. I mean, implicitly repeated debacles. This Quasar suffix he didn't seem to have in the dragon flashback. Mind you, Quasar or Quasar, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, keeps with the star theme like Stella and Vega. Specifically, it is something that is associated with a black hole, an entity that forms when a star just grows too big, becomes way too overloaded and way too dense that it collapses in on its own gravity. So kind of what I think is happening to Vegapunk in a sense, with him drowning in all this knowledge. Yeah, something's up. Either way, Vegapunk may be dying due to dividing himself up into so many different people, which in and of itself may have been done in part to save himself from dying of an information overload. If this is the case, either way, he's a bit screwed. And then there's the CP0. Be it by assassination, or drowning in the information of everything, or having his soul essentially fragmented, it seems like Vegapunk's time is approaching and he knows it. And I also want to take a moment to appreciate the sheer ingenuity of Eiichiro Oda's creativity here. We were all looking forward to Vegapunk, and now that he's here, his character is so much more dynamic and creative and fun than I think anyone even anticipated. Vegapunk has won me over, and I want to commend Oda for blowing all of our expectations out of the water and giving us something that we've never seen before. Vegapunk's character is just testament to Oda as an enigmatic creator. Moving back into the content of the chapter, I loved seeing the internal journey of sorts that Robin experienced. She went from being hostile, untrusting, and cold towards Shaka at the start of the chapter to being filled with gratitude at the end. Shaka tries to get an answer about the technologically advanced society from her, I think 3 times. The first 2 times she responds in a cool and avoidant manner. But then she finds out through him that not only is Saul still alive, but her people didn't die in vain that day. Their library was rescued by the giants and taken to Elbaf. That Vegapunk traveled to Elbaf to read the entire library that the Oharans kept, so that not only could Ohara live on within him, but he could also expand that research that they started. And that he greatly admired Professor Clover, who was sort of something like a father to Robin, I guess, closest thing. And then once Vegapunk's revealed all this, I think that won over is an understatement here. It fills my heart with joy to see this, and I can't wait to see her and Saul reunite in Elbaf. Man, Vegapunk has become like both Frankie and Robin's ultimate guy. On that beat, I also want to take this moment to say I love how defensive the crew all get over Robin crying, particularly Frankie, since he's been fanboying over Vegapunk this entire time, but the second Robin starts crying, he's ready to fight. This crew just all love each other so much, and it's really heartwarming to see. Now let's dive into some more details concerning the flashback. It was interesting to see Professor Clover here as a younger man and learn a bit more about his life. Do you guys reckon he would have been seen as technically a pirate since he was conducting operations that were deemed unlawful out on the sea? Also, it seems as though the establishment of Ohara that we know from Robin's flashback, where it was such a hub for archaeologists, was a relatively recent thing since it occurred during Clover's lifetime. I imagine that it was very much a scholarly place of knowledge for a long time before this though, since the tree of knowledge had already been there for 5,000 years. Of course, being me, I find it intriguing that this happens to take place in West Blue. Do not sleep on West Blue. I'm aiming to have another West Blue video out sometime within the week, so don't sleep on that either. In fact, I'm going to take take this opportunity to tell you to subscribe and turn on alerts, because we're going to be doing some very big brain things very soon. Maybe not like Vegapunk big, but we're going to make some attempts. You know, we're gonna give it a go. Anyway, the Oharan books. I mentioned these in my last West Blue video, where I mentioned that the rocky husk of Ohara remained standing. The island wasn't Lelouched, it was buster-cold. So there is something of it still there. In that video, I talk about how the poneglyph may still be there, which by the way is, do we know what happened to the poneglyph? Is it probably still there buried, or did someone probably take it away at some point? It probably is the latter. As well as the books, but I also wondered how the books could have survived under the water in the lake there for 22 years. The detail of the scholars throwing the books into the lake while the buster call was happening always struck me as an important little detail. Like, why would something like that be added in if it weren't to be significant later on? But I didn't guess that the books would have then been retrieved by Elbafian giants. And I'm pretty sure that this is Hyriden's crew. I mean, that looks like Gerd there. I can't wait to meet her properly. I think I'm gonna love her. I actually released a theory video right at the same time as this chapter dropped about how I believe that we might already be in the Elbaf arc in a sense, and that Egghead Island is connected to Elbaf, so check that out. The video is unfortunately performing quite poorly. Please help my engagement. In return, you get a cool theory. What's interesting here is that Elbaf and Ohara also seem to have matching giant trees. Though Elbaf's, like its people, dwarves the Oharan variety, but we're gonna need to wait to find a bit more about that. And Saul's alive! He's with the Elbafians. That's another reunion to look forward to in Elbaf, right? I find this really interesting as well, because when Robin first encounters Saul, he tells her to not get him mixed up with the barbarians of Elbaf. This is a little ironic in hindsight, seeing as we now know that the Elbafians valued the knowledge and the history of the Oharans, whereas the organization that Saul was technically affiliated with at the time were the ones, you know, doing genocide. The irony has likely since occurred to Saul himself, and he and the Elbafian giants very likely now stand united under the same creed, and his opinion on them will have changed. It may have even been them who helped him out after he was frozen by Aokiji. Aokiji, who mind you was a friend of Saul's, and Aokiji, who mind you is currently affiliated with the Blackbeard Pirates for some unknown undisclosed reason, and the Blackbeard Pirates are very likely going to appear in Elbaf. Listen, everyone and their dad's going to be in Elbaf, just wait for it. Many interesting reunions on the horizon. On the topic of him still being alive, I also want to disclose that I don't quite see this as being the same as a fake out death. I see people saying that it detracts from the tragedy of Robin's past, but Saul's death wasn't the tragedy of Ohara. The tragedy of Ohara was the lives and culture of all of the Oharans, and the fact that Robin was the sole survivor. Saul wasn't even from Ohara. He'd actually known Robin for under a week. Not that this diminishes the importance of their relationship and the impact that he had on her life, but he was simply collateral damage who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. As for where Saul's actually from, well, South Blue apparently. He's described as a strange giant, being that he's obviously different from his Elbafian cousins, so we'll probably be getting some interesting lore concerning him and other non-Elbafian giants on the near horizon. And this is all the more interesting when we remember that Saul also carries the elusive will of D. Anyway, it's really exciting that we've entered an era of One Piece where we can get such substantial scenes involving dragon, if only flashback. Yes, these are crumbs, dragon crumbs, but when you're starving, you settle for it. Dragon, being the worldwide social rake that he is, has history with a lot of interesting people. He and Vegapunk have history, as they clearly already know each other at this point, though seem to be each unaware that the other knew Professor Clover. It also seems as though Dragon may have been inspired by Professor Clover's movement of gallivanting the globe for the truth of the world and held him in a high regard. Also, there's some certain things that I noticed about Dragon's appearance here. For one thing, a good god, he really needs to find a good conditioner. And honestly, I can't fault him for that, believe me. It can be hard to find one that works for your hair. Why do you think I always got these wigs going on? He is also rather lacking in the face tattoo department. I guess once he officially launched his revolutionary army, he was like, well, I was never going to get a corporate job anyway, might as well live my best life. However, you may notice the pattern of the tattoo worn as a... what is that? Is that a leg band? A garter belt leg thing? Also, he looks very strikingly, in my opinion, like Rocksteady Zebek, but that's another video. Anyway, let's stop superficially scrutinizing Dragon's appearance, however, and focus on other aspects of his character, like his heart. He's very impacted by what happened here in Ohara. Clearly the beginning of what would one day be the Revolutionary Army is here, as he mentions having strung together a group of freedom fighters. From what we can deduce here, what happened in Ohara was the last straw, from Dragon simply having a band of freedom fighters to launching a full-blown revolutionary army. Keeping in mind it's even confirmed in this chapter that Dragon hates war, but desperate times, desperate measures. It's all a means to an end. And Vegapunk, apparently, like the other OGs, Kuma and Ivankov, could have been a part of Dragon's posse as well, but rejected this offer, instead opting to side with the literal enemy of that very posse, as they and they alone have the necessary funding for his innovative endeavors. Go where the money is, I guess. And this leads me to the big question that I have coming out of this chapter. Is Vegapunk a good person? I want to say yes, but it feels a bit more complicated than that. Obviously, what he values above all else is the pursuit of all kinds of knowledge. Not just that of science and technology, but also of history. He considers himself a scholar and strives to progress every field of thought possible. In fact, he's one of the people helping keep the Will of Ohara alive, since he's not only read all that they recorded, but also continued their research. Similar could be said about his pursuit of knowledge on the ancient kingdom. Someone only truly dies when they're forgotten, right? Vegapunk wants to assure that none of this civilization, none of this knowledge is forgotten. And yet, he's working for the world government, because they have money to fund his pursuits. He values the pursuit of knowledge above all else, and is even willing to join an organization that he doesn't agree with in order to access those resources. And as we've seen from Lilith and Atlas, even the world government don't seem to have enough resources to offer them in order to fully fund their ideas, whatever they may entail. The world government have committed atrocities, and Vegapunk knows this. How could somebody who knows this still serve the world government with a clear conscience? So while Vegapunk has won particularly Robin over in this chapter, for understandable reasons, and myself in terms of how Oda has gone above and beyond anybody's wildest expectations as to how Vegapunk functions, things still aren't totally in the clear for me. I mean, why does Shaka wear that mask? As a literary device, masks like these can function as a guise of sorts and indicate that a character is hiding something, concealing the full truth, etc. At the end of their scene in this chapter, he also wants to show them an unspecified something, which feels a little foreboding to me. And then there's Lilith, for another thing, who is Vegapunk as well and supposed to represent evil. And so far she's clashed with Shaka and Edison and has been generally antagonistic towards the crew, leading them to the Seraphim, perhaps intentionally, among other things. However, in this flashback with Dragon, Vegapunk says that the world government is a huge organization and that there are plenty of decent people, particularly in the Marines. From what we've seen, this is definitely true when it comes to the Marines. There's lots of Marines who are good people, but what intrigued me is the implication that there are also good, decent people within the world government who could be reasoned with. Because from what we've seen of the world government so far, it doesn't have as good a track record as the Marines in terms of decent people. However, there are individuals within, for example, maybe certain Cypherpole units who we saw in Onigashima, who are basically just glorified slaves, indoctrinated from childhood, some of whom probably aren't really terrible. And there are possibly other decent people hiding in there as well, here and there. I think Smoker said at some point that there's no organization made entirely of humans that's entirely made of good, well-intentioned people. It could also be true that there's no organization made up entirely of evil, maliciously intentioned people. And maybe Vegapunk himself could be an example of a decent person who operates from within the world government. In his flashback, he tells Dragon, don't lose sight of the end goal, which makes me think, what is he cooking? Perhaps he is secretly helping out the Revolutionary Army in his own way from within the world government. In this case, I'm sure that the whole Kuma situation is intertwined. At the end of the day, I'm gonna say that yes, he probably is a good person, but he has a lot of explaining to do. So what are you guys' thoughts? Don't forget to subscribe and switch on alerts if you haven't. Also, check my links out down below if you want to follow me on any of the socials. I'm Dawn of the World, and I will see you next time. Bye guys!